Peace. So, I'm here to give everyone an update on what's happening with Jamhal Slave Abdullah Bey and Rise of the Moors. So, in July 3rd, 2021, there was a situation where there were 11 Moors on the side of the highway. They were not outside of the car. They were inside of the car. Police pulled up. They didn't know it was police at first. There were no lights. This wasn't a police stop. They were already pulled over on the side of the road, getting ready to put some gas into the car. Police asked Moors, once Moors did come out of the cars, to put their arms away. Moors said, for our safety, we're going to keep them on us. So they were all arrested, taken to jail. Trial lasted a very long time. Jamhal's trial in particular dragged out about 3 years. So finally I believe it was June 18th. Do you remember, Jamhal? If that was the trial date that
I was found guilty June 16th, I think.
Okay. So June 16th or the 18th of last year, 2024, Jamhal was found guilty for most of the charges from the July 3rd, 2021 incident. He was convicted. He was sent to prison. He's still currently in prison. He's been in prison since this time last year. Now, after his conviction, most of his charges were dropped because they were deemed unconstitutional. Jamhal has been making these arguments challenging the constitutionality of the situation. He challenged jurisdiction. He did the whole nine. So I'm going to see if I can pull up this email so I can prove that most of the gun charges that Jamhal was charged and convicted with have been dropped. He was convicted again June 18th, 2024. In April of this year, 2025, a case that Jamhal kept referencing called the Commonwealth versus Donnell, or Dean, what is it? Dean F. Donnell versus the Commonwealth?
I don't know. I just know it's called the Donnell decision.
Right, the Donnell decision. So, Jamhal had been arguing that this Donnell case, which the Donnell case had happened 2 months after the July 3rd incident with the Moors. So July 3rd, 2021, the Moors got arrested. I want to say 2 or 3 months in that same year, 2021, the Donnell case, basically it was a man from New Hampshire riding through Massachusetts. He was pulled over. He had his arm in the car with him. He told the cops.
He had high capacity magazines too, but they never charged him with it.
Interesting.
Because he's white.
So, he argued that since he's not a citizen of Massachusetts, that those charges are unconstitutional. So he won that case. But then the Supreme Court of Justice, I think I'm saying it backwards, you know what I mean, a higher court, picked up the case.
Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts.
The Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts picked up the case to see if to review the case, to make sure that, that was in fact correct, that they did make the right decision. So in March, the Supreme Judicial Court decided that the Donnell case was correct, that people who are not citizens of Massachusetts cannot be held. The Jamhal and a lot of the Moors were held under that 10M licensing scheme. So one of the Moors, Lucha L, was actually convicted the same day as Jamhal, found guilty on some charges, but when the Donnell case decision came down from the Supreme Court, Lucha was set free. All charges dropped. No parole, no probation, nothing. Scot-free home. The same did not happen for Jamhal or the rest of the Moors who are still awaiting trial. Jamhal, since they did drop most of the charges, hold on, I'm signing into my email really quick so that way I can show you. Actually, I can show you on my phone. Since those charges were dropped, Jamhal had a resentencing hearing. Since he was convicted, they gave him 3 to 5 years. And since, like I said, all of those gun charges were dropped, since it was deemed unconstitutional, Jamhal had a resentencing hearing, and the judge said no. Why? What were the judge's claims or his reasoning for saying no, Jamhal?
He didn't really have any. He just said, he basically said it doesn't matter what type of programs I've done and how much good time I had. He's not changing the sentence. He said that because charges were dropped, vacated, and deemed unconstitutional, as a matter of procedure, I had a right to have a resentencing hearing. So he basically said, we're just following procedure to give you the hearing, but we're not giving you less time.
Okay. Sorry, I am looking for the documents. I have found them. I think these are it. Nope, this is the motions that he filed for you. Okay, here we are. Okay, so here it says, there is no dispute, right here, there is no dispute the defendant was a non-resident from Rhode Island charged under the same now invalidated non-resident licensing scheme. In these circumstances, the defendant's convictions under General Law 26910A cannot stand, as the statute has been deemed void and no longer in effect against non-residents based on it being deemed facially unconstitutional. So you can see this is from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. These are from April, I believe. So his charges were deemed unconstitutional for all of those gun charges. The one charge they did stick with him, remember, his charges were dropped after he was convicted. And they stuck him with the high capacity magazine charge because it holds the longest amount of time, the 3 to 5 years. So since it holds the 3 to 5 years, that's why the judge denied the resentencing, basically, because the 3 to 5 years, basically he had been charged with 1 year, 1 year, and then 3 years, but they were all running concurrently. So he was denied resentencing. Again, his charges were deemed unconstitutional. When Jamhal did argue this Donald decision, they had told him that that decision did not apply to him until the Supreme Court of Justice had to review the case. Therefore, the Commonwealth respectfully requests this court dismiss that count. So all of the possession charges are gone, and at this point, he's just has the high capacity charges. He recently had a parole hearing earlier this week or last week, and they did not know that his charges had been dropped and that he went from having, 10 charges down to 1 or 2, and that all the possession charges were dropped. So they based his parole off of that, and they denied him parole. even though
all they had was a police report.
all they had was the police report, not any of the recent judgments. So Jamhal
Not
wrote,
not any trial records, not anything, just a police report. That's it.
so Jamhal did appeal the parole decision, in which they denied him parole. At this point, he served how long, Jamhal, total? You've served
27 months.
Yeah, so I think that's a little over 2 years.
27 months with 4 months, a little over 4 months of good time.
So, we're not sure what to do at this point, because at this point, since most of his charges were dropped and his parole is being based on the original police report that those charges were dropped on, he's now basically sitting in jail as a political prisoner because lawyers talk to each other, and one of the Moore's lawyer said that the governor herself does not want Jamhal to be released because she's going up for re-election this year, or soon this year or next year. I'm pretty sure it's this year. The prosecutor who prosecuted the Moores on this case was also the prosecutor in this Commonwealth versus Donnell case. So since he lost that case, that made this case unravel as well. So it's not a good look for her. It's not a good look for the state of Massachusetts. So again, Jamhal's being kept as political prisoner in jail. Most of these charges were dropped and deemed unconstitutional. And he's still sitting in prison. He's been denied parole. Many supporters have turned their backs on us. People have made up a lot of lies. Right before Jamhal went into jail, his website was hijacked by a few different Moorish organizations because they felt they had the right to do so. The website locked us out. It had gotten shut down. Call me back, Jamhal. His website had gotten shut down. We weren't able to even sign back into it. A lot of those said Moors claimed that all we had to do was pay $11 a month to keep the website. That wasn't true. We had just been banned from the site for some reason. We didn't even know that there was a way to get it back. So Moors bought the website and are continuing to use the Rise of the Moors website. They're selling merch saying Rise of the Moors. So if you go to riseofthemoors.org right now, that is not our website. That's not Jamhal Talibadula Bey's website. Those are Moors in Canada and a few different Moorish organizations posing as Rise of the Moors, selling merch as Rise of the Moors. So don't use that site thinking that it is Jamhal. It is not.
If you believe this should be a private call, please hang up and follow facility instructions to register this number as a private number. To accept this free call, thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Walaikum salam. I was just updating them on the website and how that it's not your website anymore. It's just being, I guess, fraudulently being called Rise of the Moors, but it's not our organization. So at this point, we need help from the Moors because, again, Jamhal is being held political prisoner. His charges have been dropped for the most part. I believe he's only has 1 or 2 on there out of the 10 or 11. And do you want to talk about the parole denial?
Sure. On the typed response that they gave me, it says parole denied. It says Mr. Latimer is serving a sentence for serious firearms and ammunition related offenses. Mr. Latimer is co-defendant for involvement in an armed standoff with the police for several hours, resulting in the north and southbound lanes of Interstate 95 being shut down. Mr. Latimer is encouraged to take all available programming as well as victim impact to gain insight and they basically said Mr. Lotto was not suitable for parole. So in their decision, according to the law, there's specific legal standards that they have to meet, which they did. So I wrote an 8-page handwritten appeal specifying each specific grounds that I have, citing the law that they said I'm supposed to cite in reference. And I handed that to the institutional parole officer. Her name is Sue. I handed it to her directly. And about 2 days later, I got a response saying I did not meet the grounds set forth in the same law. But in my entire argument, which I emailed to my attorney and to my family, so everyone has it, you just read what I wrote, you see I met every single grounds in the cited CMR that they said I didn't meet. So instead of them denying my appeal, they're just not reviewing it, saying I didn't meet the grounds, even though I did meet it. So I don't really have a defense against that, if that makes sense, which it clearly makes sense. So there's nothing I can do. But my family has the letter that I wrote. I typed it up and emailed it to my family. They also have the reason/comments that the parole board wrote. So if anyone cares enough to contact the Massachusetts Parole Board, they can do so in reference to letters that I wrote to say, look, they're clearly, again, violating due process. Just like July 3rd, 2021, I said what's happening is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court of Massachusetts finally agreed in 2024 that what I was saying in 2021 was unconstitutional. So it doesn't matter how right I am. If people don't support me, if people don't help me, it's never going to matter. So then now imagine how many people are negatively affected because good people say and do nothing. So if they can deny me parole by saying, well, he's facing charges that were vacated, but we're just going to say that anyway, and then not review my appeal, then what can they do to everybody else? What are they doing to everybody else? We can't sit here and complain about systematic oppression, and when it happens, we say and do nothing. And then when it happens to us, we want to beg for help. The difference is, I've been speaking out against this before it was happening to me, and people abandon us. Why?
So if Moors want to...
What happens when it happens to them? Because what used to happen was, I would say something on live, Moors would get mad, they would hate on me, and then privately they'd come running to me, calling and begging for help. Why? Why is it that now when something's happening to you, now you want help? When you're being abused, but when the next person is, you don't care. We have no right to complain with them when that happens. So now when someone is asking you for help, someone who's been helping you for years is now asking you for help. And if you don't want to help, I want to. But the people that are free and outside of prison have more of a voice than me at this point. Because everything that happens here is internal. Another example. I was supposed to get classified to a minimum security prison. They said no, using a nature of offense override in June of this year. But a month prior, the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Reentry said they can no longer use that nature of offense override. But they did it to me anyway. Why? Because my only means of remedy is in here, in the prison. So they can do whatever they want. You know? There is no support for people in the prison. They don't care. Change has to come from outside of prison.
So if Moors would like to write a letter of support to, you can title it to the Massachusetts.
It's not even support, it's a complaint. that due process is blatantly being followed. They didn't even read. One, they denied my move to a minimum using an override they can't use anymore. That was publicly posted in the prison for all inmates to see. A month prior to them using that same code, they still did it. I wrote to the assistant deputy commissioner of reentry, telling them that this happened, and nothing changed. I'm still here. I wrote an 8-page appeal stating my specific grounds to the parole board. They didn't read it, and they said I didn't meet the grounds. So it's not a letter of support. It's exposing what they're doing. That's what needs to happen. It needs to be exposed.
So if you would like to write a formal complaint to the Massachusetts Parole Board, any information that you might need, whether it's Jamhal's court documents, the parole denial,
You could also request. You could do a public, what's it called, public or whatever request, because my parole hearing was recorded. So you can request the recording, and then specify how exactly they didn't meet the standards established by the law in Massachusetts to determine if someone's eligible for parole or not.
You can email a letter to riseofthemoors@gmail.com, and I can send it to the Massachusetts Parole Board. Just title it as such, to the Massachusetts Parole Board. I will give you whatever supporting document you might need to do so. Just send us an email. Any help is needed and appreciated. Again, most of Jamhal's charges were dropped for being unconstitutional. They held...
Can I just highlight something that you read?
Of course.
When you read that motion for the prosecutor to vacate and dismiss the charges, deem them unconstitutional, it talked about the license scheme, right? Because it would be unconstitutional for an out-of-state resident to apply for a Massachusetts license, right? You can have a high-capacity firearm and magazine in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts if you have a license. So according to the standard that they set, not me, even though I said it in 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, when I said it, it was wrong. But when they said it, it's right. But even then, they're still holding on to these charges to keep me in prison. When they themselves, like their highest court said, it would be unconstitutional for a resident to apply for a Massachusetts firearms license. And in Massachusetts, you can get a license for high-capacity magazines, for high-capacity firearms. Yet I'm still in prison. If you can't see what's happening, just pray that it doesn't happen to you.
Well, I think that is it, Moors. Like and share the video. Try to get out the information. Most of Jamhal's charges has been dropped. All the gun charges were dropped. The only thing that he was stuck with was high capacity magazine, which, what are you going to do with a magazine if there's no gun? But anyway, he was denied parole. Oh, the reason they gave was because the cops were scared.
Yeah, they said, this is what they said. They said, listen, you're very intelligent, you can articulate yourself very well. But and you're on the right track, but we don't think you're suitable for parole, so we're going to deny parole. We see here that the classification board recommends you move to a minimum and take CRA. Meanwhile, they didn't even know that 2 months prior to my parole hearing, they already denied my move to a minimum using the code R override nature of offense that they said they couldn't use before. Right, so the parole board didn't even know that, which them having erroneous information is a ground for an appeal, which is exactly what I wrote, and they denied it. They further said, we think you should take victim impact because the police in the community were scared. And then they suggested that I do the CRA, which is the Correctional Recovery Academy, for people with substance abuse problems, which I do not have. According to the Massachusetts law, there has to be a risk/need assessment. I have no need for substance abuse problems because I don't have a substance abuse problem. Furthermore, according to the law in Massachusetts, when anyone has a parole board hearing, the parole board shall notify a victim, which means they must. It's not an option. They have to notify the victim. No victims were notified in my case, which means the parole board violated correct procedure. If the parole board is saying that there are no victims to notify in my case, then there's no need for me to do victim impact, which means they should have let me go. All of this was explained in detail in the appeal, and they still said no. They didn't even review what I wrote. They just said I didn't meet the grounds.
Even though
which means they're not going to see it, which means I can't even appeal a denial of an appeal because they didn't even review the appeal. They didn't even know that I went to trial. The person that was questioning me the most was a European attorney. He was mad, big mad that I knew anything about the law. He didn't know that I took it to trial. He thought it was a big deal. He didn't know that my co-defendant, who I went to trial with, Lucha, is home right now, on the streets, home, because charges were vacated, dismissed, and deemed unconstitutional. He didn't even know that. He didn't even know that the classification board at Milford, Massachusetts, denied my move to a minimum 2 months prior to me having this parole decision. So for the board to require me to go through the step-down process of going through a minimum in order to meet the requirements of parole, they were basing it off of flawed information. They didn't know the relevant facts that specific charge.
Sorry, Jamhal, the baby's crying. I have to wrap it up.
Okay, I'm just saying the things that I'm specifying, the reason why I'm saying these words very clearly and emphasizing them, is because they're grounds for an actual appeal.
No, I know. The baby's crying. Okay, I'm going to leave the phone. I'm going to leave it live so you can continue to talk. I have to go get the baby. Okay. Also, meanwhile, there are people who are actually shooting other human beings, getting parole, and Jamhal still being denied. And the judge himself mentioned this wasn't a gun violence case. Nobody was pointing guns at anybody. No one was threatening anyone. So there's no reason why Jamhal should still be in jail, especially when his charges have been deemed unconstitutional and vacated. Thank you so much. Please send a letter to the Massachusetts Parole Board.
One more thing, right? All of the ammunition charges were dropped. So I have a gun with no bullets?
Thank you, Morris. Peace.